No, ladies and gentlemen, your screen is not broken. The title makes sense. Hi, I'm Larson Halleck, certified personal trainer and semi-certified anthropologist. Several weeks ago, I became aware of a book titled Manthropology by Peter McAllister, professor of anthropology from Griffin University in Australia. It posited to statistically document how wimpy and feeble modern man is compared to our primitive forebears and explain why that might be the case. Well, naturally, I thought, what could be more manthropology than a book about the failing of modernity on the male of the species? So I did something that I'm usually loath to do. I spent money, and I got a copy of this book. Ladies and gentlemen, there's not too much I advocate spending money on, but this is one of those things. This book is extensively well-researched and documented and argues its point succinctly. And that point is, holy shit, modern man sucks. Like, really hard. Physically, mentally, and emotionally. In short, it's yet another example of Larson's axiom. Any anthropology book that doesn't suck basically corroborates everything we discuss on Manthropology. But more than just an ample dose of the black pill, it gives a few suggestions as to how we can make ourselves more akin to our mighty forefathers. Anthropology, antiquarianism, and physical training. If Professor McAllister didn't write this book, I feel like I might have had to. Before we begin, let us look at our man. Peter McAllister is an archaeologist from Griffith University on the Gold Coast of Australia. He has also been a journalist, a DJ, and a sports commentator. McAllister explains that he read a bunch of reports about declining sperm counts and decreased testosterone, and he wanted to disprove all of this stuff with science, to show that the modern man was just as virile and strong as he had always been. Professor McAllister failed real bad. He went through categories of strength and speed, intellect and the arts, even such diverse and surprising categories like metrosexual grooming and alcohol tolerance, and we are inferior in all of them. He also draws comparisons to prehistoric hominids and modern great apes whenever applicable. On that note, McAllister discusses in one chapter how the bluffing, duplicitous behavior stereotypically associated with modern man might increase evolutionary fitness in some ways. Looking at the orangutan, beta males will literally grow smaller and live amongst the females and children, and then rape females when they get a chance, in contrast to their Chad Thundercockian counterparts. Obvious parallels are obvious, even if I highly doubt this is what he had in mind. But such behavior is of course not considered masculine by anybody. Once again, Anthro Professor Larson is right. Anyway, on the topic of machismo, let us go through each category briefly and discuss the problem and possible solutions to it. Despite the growing muscularity and the growing grotesqueness of muscularity of Mr. Universe winners over the last 50 years, a comparison of upper arm musculature by looking at the size and depth of muscle attachments on the radial bones, thickness of the bones themselves, which become thicker in response to force regularly being put upon them, and calculating cross-sectional area, which is to say the amount of force in pounds per square inch that the bicep muscle can create, 62 pounds a constant, times the total surface area. McAllister calculates that a modern arm wrestling champion would be bested by a type specimen Neanderthal woman. To be fair, this was calculated partially due to muscle mass and partially due to the shorter limbs of Homo neanderthalis, giving them a distinct leverage advantage. There also exist numerous ancient lifting stones and the like that few, if any, strong men can lift today. Similarly, archaeological evidence from primeval Australia suggests an ancient aboriginal hunter, judging by his stride length and ball-the-foot-centric walking posture, was running as fast as Usain Bolt runs today. Let me repeat that. Mr. Bolt runs 27 miles per hour on rubber tracks with shoes and decades of training. Willandra Lake's T8 specimen, in contrast, runs barefoot through the mud. In stamina too, we're weak. Modern recreationists rowing Greek triremes can't even come close to the pace of 7 knots per hour for multiple hours that the rowers at Salamis could. Going back even further, McAllister hypothesizes, albeit in a somewhat fanciful tone rather than the well-researched arm wrestling test, that our early hominid ancestors, before inventing stone tools or any sort of weaponry, just punched the shit out of predators, looking at the punching power of chimpanzees to fight off baboons and other attackers. I don't think I need to tell you that the average low-testosterone man can't punch worth a damn today. If you don't believe me, I could tell you stories about the scrawny soy eaters that I allow to punch me in the stomach when I teach my kung fu classes. As an amusing side note, McAllister points out that men of basically all cultures aspire to be strong and muscular, so that puts to pat a feminist lie about Western body standards or whatever. Vaguely tying into the brawn, but much less quantifiable, McAllister goes on to posit that not only are we physically weaker, we're also emotionally and spiritually weaker. Of interest to anthro nerds like myself is the positing of why big acts of daredevilry evolved. He dubs them conspicuous bravery, to show off your evolutionary fitness to get some. More specifically, women express short-term attraction to these bravado-having risk-takers, but they seldom marry them. In other words, alpha fucks and beta bucks, Hartiste was right. To subdivide even further, bravado impresses men, not women directly, but as anybody knows, a high-status man attracts women. It's not a direct attraction, but it ends up with sex nonetheless. Now, today there are daredevils like base jumpers and train surfers, but how do they compare to, say, the swing-kicking players of the 19th century Brûlé Sioux, in which two teams of two boys try to kick and knee the other team into unconsciousness, or the various penis mutilations that seem quite common amongst primitive tribes? In comparing modern mixed martial arts to ancient Pancratian, we can see the former actually has pretty low rates of permanent injury and death, despite its fearsome reputation. Thank you, John McCain. There have been only 3 confirmed deaths in mixed martial arts over the 30 years or so of the sport's organized existence, whereas Pancratian regularly had deaths. Casualty rates in the army were much higher in the past than they are now, as I discussed in my War Before Civilization video, and the marching ability of, say, the Roman legions puts any modern army to shame. Related to this is the chapter on sports, where even those were far more brutal in the past than they are today, looking at games like the Mesoamerican ball game in medieval tournaments. Endurance was, again, much greater back then. Several ancient Greek Olympians won multiple wrestling competitions and wrestled multiple opponents in one day. Humorously, ancient athletes were even outclassing modern athletes in terms of being pieces of shit. Say what you will about Michael Vick, he didn't lead an anti-Semitic pogrom through Byzantium's Jewish quarter like Porphyrius the chariot racing champion did. Leaving the physical attributes behind, we can look at a couple of softer attributes. The Bards chapter discusses ancient and medieval poets and compares them to modern rappers, the closest modern equivalent. For many ancient poets, including the Greek Homer, they didn't know how to write, and thus their poems were orally transmitted. Furthermore, McAllister surmises that the recurring phrases in the Iliad, such as the rosy-fingered dawn and the wine-dark sea, are in fact memory mnemonics, similar to how rappers doing freestyles have a bank of stock phrases that they easily rhyme and build off of. So essentially, he is theorizing that the first performances of the Iliad and the Odyssey were freestyle raps, and the sheer amount of lines in those epics puts any rapper's memory and improvisational abilities to shame. Battle rapping was also quite common in various cultures around the world, such as the Nith song duels of pre-colonial Inuits, which would go on for up to 24 hours. The Babes chapter discusses the sexual prowess of many peoples, notably the Trobriand Islanders, and their abilities to bang for hours on end without ejaculation. So with all of those nice superpowers we used to have, why did we lose them? No, it's not women's fault. The last chapter, titled We Can Be Heroes, seeks to answer this. As luck would have it, most of it is not genetic. Looking at skeletal muscles in the brawn chapter, for example, McAllister theorizes that releasing the body from its high caloric need to support heavy musculature allowed us to evolve more powerful brains instead. He uses the shrinking of the jaw muscles to support this. The heavy sagittal crescent zygomatic arches of the chimp skull leaves much less room for the brain case than the human skull. While evolving away from those big jaw muscles means we can have bigger brains. Similarly, the overall weakness can, if anything, be chalked up to a lack of training. The ancient Greeks and Mongols and Native Americans discussed are biologically no different from us. The only difference is that they have spent thousands upon thousands of hours rowing or lifting or wrestling or shooting bows and arrows and developed the musculature accordingly. Over the past 2 million years, humanity on the whole has lost 40% of our bone mass and correspondingly muscular strength. Before anyone says it's just genetics and evolution, the heads and joint connections of bones have not changed much since Homo erectus. The shafts of the bones, which respond to force and microtrauma, are what has lost the bone mass. In other words, the ancients' athletic ability was not genetic, but epigenetic, or ontogenetic, which is to say affected by external forces. Our forefathers did strenuous activity much more than us today, and even their lives before military service, or the performances of 19th century strongmen, to set another case McAllister mentions, were usually strenuous lives as jobbies, working on a farm or in the factories. And if you don't believe that, even laborers from 200 or 300 years ago were stronger than us today. A sledgehammer in the 1800s weighed 40 pounds, whereas the average man today uses one that's maybe 10 or 15. McAllister specifies that the critical time period for building real functional strength and ability is between the ages of 8 and 14, which is when the most bone mass is added on. Most of my viewers are probably older than that, but if you have kids, calcium them up and get them training at that age. As a trainer, I would not recommend heavy weight training in the traditional sense for a kid that young, but I would definitely recommend calisthenics, martial arts, and good old-fashioned agricultural labor. The extreme bravery of many primitive peoples is likely something they developed because they faced such hardship in their lives. Notably, Native Americans were brilliantly artisanal torturers, and perhaps correspondingly had a reputation for extreme bravery in the face of pain. The extreme sense of group solidarity within a tribe and the promise of group retribution gave strength to the ancient warrior, and it has been observed, modern special forces units as well. Unfortunately, some of it is genetic, most notably short-sightedness. Charles Darwin noticed that the South American men on his voyage had better eyesight than most white men, even when the white men were using telescopes. Even in cases where the white men lived amongst the natives from birth even, they still didn't have as good eyesight. But these genetic deficiencies are in the minority. In the end, the feebleness of modern man is largely something caused by modern society, very recently. It thus can be reversed with cultural sea change. It's not likely to happen on a societal basis, but you, of course, can put a few pinches of savagery into your life. Hell, I mean, if you lift weights, do cardio, and read books in 2018, you're basically a superhero compared to the tubs of shit most people are nowadays. Albeit the meager training of you or I pales in comparison to the half-tamed man-beasts of the distant past, who are superheroes to us just like we are to the average dweeb. I'm Larson Halleck, and, either one of my sign-offs would fit here, to be honest. I appreciate humanity in all of its splendor, and said splendor really confirms we ought to keep on training.